Hey there, welcome back. You've really thrown down the gauntlet with this deep dive. If you're not your thoughts, then who's thinking them? That's a question that's puzzled philosophers and everyday folks for ages. And we're diving into the Buddhist perspective today. To help me untangle this knot, I've got our expert here.
This question is a fantastic starting point for a deep dive because it really challenges our assumptions about who we are and how our minds work.
Exactly. And the YouTube video you sent, if you're not your thoughts, who's thinking them? Buddhism's answer jumps right in with a challenge. It asks you to predict your next thought. I have to admit, I tried it and my mind went totally blank. How about you? Did you give it a shot?
It's a classic exercise, and it often reveals just how little control we have over this constant stream of thoughts. It's like trying to grab a handful of water. It just slips through your fingers.
That's such a great visual. It reminds me of that feeling when you're trying to remember something, and the harder you try, the further away it seems. The video uses this experience to introduce the concept of dependent origination, which I found really fascinating.
Dependent origination is a core Buddhist teaching that explains how everything arises from a web of causes and conditions. Thoughts don't just pop into our heads randomly. They're triggered by something, often a chain of events we're not even aware of.
So it's like a domino effect. One thought leads to another, and before you know it, you're miles away from where you started.
That's a good way to think about it. Think of it like this. You're walking down the street and you smell freshly baked bread from a bakery. That simple sensory experience can trigger a flood of memories, emotions, and even physical sensations. You might remember a childhood baking experience, feel a pang of nostalgia, and even experience your mouth watering. All of this is interconnected.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But wouldn't this make it incredibly hard to change our thinking patterns? If our thoughts are all tangled up in this web of causes and conditions, how can we ever break free?
That's where things get really interesting. Buddhism doesn't advocate for stopping thoughts altogether. That would be impossible. Instead, it emphasizes the importance of understanding how thoughts arise and learning to relate to them differently.
So it's not about silencing the mind. It's about changing the channel.
I like that analogy. And the first step is simply becoming aware of the constant chatter in our minds. The video calls it the monkey mind, always swinging from one thought to the next, chattering away.
Oh, tell me about it. My monkey mind has definitely been in overdrive lately.
We all have a monkey mind. It's part of being human. The key is to learn to observe those thoughts without judgment. Simply notice them arising and passing like clouds drifting across the sky.
Okay, so if we're not supposed to identify with our thoughts, if we're not our monkey minds, who's doing the thinking? I think that's the real heart of the listener's question, isn't it?
It is, and it leads us to the Buddhist concept of anatta, often translated as no self or non-self. Now, this can be a tricky concept to grasp because we tend to think of ourselves as having this solid, unchanging self at the center of our experience.
Right. I'm the one having thoughts, making decisions, experiencing the world. If there's no me, it seems like everything falls apart.
It's a natural feeling. The video explores this by asking you to actually try to locate this thinker behind your thoughts. Where is this I that's doing the thinking? Can you pinpoint it?
That's a great question. When I try to find it, it's like searching for a ghost. There's this sense of emptiness, but it's not a scary emptiness. It's more like a spaciousness of freedom.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The thinker we imagine that solid self is just another thought, a mental construction. The video uses the analogy of a river. Thoughts are like the constantly changing water flowing, ebbing and flowing again.
So it's not that there's no river, it's just that the river is always in motion. It's never a fixed, static thing.
Exactly. Buddhism teaches that our experience is made up of 5 aggregates or bundles of experience that are constantly interacting and changing. Think of them like ingredients in a recipe. They come together to create the flavor of experience, but none of them are the cake itself.
5 aggregates, that sounds like a lot to unpack. Could you give me a taste of what those, at least the ones that relate to this idea of a thinker?
Of course. There are physical sensations, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness itself. But it's important to note, none of these aggregates are a self. Even consciousness, which is often mistaken for a self, is just another flow, another process of arising and passing away.
So there's no little me inside pulling the levers and calling the shots.
Buddhism suggests that it's more like a dance, an interplay of these different elements. And recognizing this is incredibly liberating because it frees us from clinging to a fixed sense of self.
Okay, that's a lot to digest, and I'm sure our listener's mind is buzzing with questions. But I think we've laid some good groundwork here. We've explored the concept of dependent origination, that web of causes and conditions that gives rise to our thoughts. We've touched on the idea of the monkey mind and the importance of mindful observation. And we've delved into the Buddhist concept of anatta, challenging the idea of a solid, unchanging self behind the thoughts. I'm already knowing a shift in perspective. How about you?
Absolutely. But this is just the beginning. We've started to peel back the layers, but there's much more to explore. What happens when we let go of this idea of a separate self? What does it mean for how we live our lives, how we relate to the world?
That's a great question, and I'm eager to dive deeper. But first, I think we both need a moment to let all of this sink in.
I agree. This is deep stuff, and it takes time to digest.
Okay, I think I've caught my breath.
Yeah.
That was quite a mental workout. So we've established that according to Buddhism, there's no fixed self calling the shots. But if we're not our thoughts, and there's no thinker pulling the levers, how does that change how we actually live our lives? What does that even look like?
That's where things get really practical, because understanding anatta isn't just about intellectual gymnastics. It has the potential to transform how we relate to everything, our goals, our relationships, even our sense of purpose.
So it's not just some abstract philosophical idea.
Yeah.
It actually has real-world implications. I have to admit, I'm intrigued.
Absolutely. One area where this shift in perspective can be particularly helpful is in dealing with difficult emotions. The video highlights the story of Queen Kima, who was considered the most beautiful woman in the land. She was deeply attached to her appearance, but the Buddha challenged her to see the impermanence of beauty.
Okay, so how does this story relate to, say, my own struggles with anxiety? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I can get pretty worked up sometimes about things that are completely out of my control.
Well, think about it this way. When you get caught up in anxiety, what's happening? You're identifying with those anxious thoughts and feelings, believing they are you. But anatta reminds us that these thoughts and emotions are just passing phenomena like clouds in the sky.
So instead of saying, I am anxious, I could say there's anxiety present. That seems like a subtle shift, but I could see how it might create some distance between me and those overwhelming feelings.
Exactly. It allows you to observe those feelings without getting swept away by them. And that's where mindfulness comes in.
Okay, mindfulness. We've touched on this a bit already, but could you break it down for me and for our listener? How does mindfulness fit into all of this?
Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It's about cultivating awareness of our thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations as they arise and pass away.
But doesn't that sound kind of passive? Like if I'm just observing my thoughts, how does that actually change anything?
It might seem passive, but it's actually a very active process. The video uses the analogy of a clear sky. Our thoughts are like clouds that constantly pass through the sky of our awareness.
Okay, I like that visual. So instead of getting caught up in the storm clouds of my thoughts, I'm learning to step back and see the bigger picture, the vast open sky of awareness.
Precisely. And the more you practice mindfulness, the more you realize that you are not those thoughts and feelings. You are the awareness that's witnessing them.
So it's like I'm shifting from being the actor in the drama of my thoughts to becoming the audience. I can watch the show without getting caught up in the plot.
That's a great way to put it. The video mentions the story of the monk Anuruddha, who achieved great peace by cultivating this mindful awareness. He trained his mind to observe thoughts and sensations with equanimity without clinging or aversion.
Equanimity, that's a word I hear a lot in meditation circles. What does it actually mean in practice?
It means meeting each experience with a balanced mind, not getting carried away by the highs or the lows. It's that sense of calm amidst the storm, a steady presence that doesn't waver.
I can see how that would be helpful, especially when I'm dealing with anxiety. But how do I actually cultivate equanimity? It seems like a pretty tall order, especially in the midst of daily life.
It is a practice, and it takes time. But the key is to start small. Notice your breath. Pay attention to the sensations in your body. Observe the sounds around you. These simple acts of mindfulness can help you develop that muscle of equanimity.
So it's not about forcing myself to feel calm or pretending that difficult emotions don't exist. It's more about creating space around them, allowing them to be there without letting them control me.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that neuroscience is starting to catch up with these ancient wisdom traditions. The video mentions studies showing how mindfulness practices can actually change the brain structure, reducing activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and anxiety.
Wow, so it's not just some fluffy feel-good concept. It's actually backed by science. That's pretty convincing.
It makes me wonder, are there other practical tools that Buddhism offers for managing our monkey minds?
There are, and the video introduces a powerful one, wise attention, or Yoniso Manasikara. It's about learning to choose where we direct our attention rather than being constantly pulled in different directions by whatever thought pops up.
Okay, so it's like being the conductor of the orchestra of my mind. I get to choose which instruments play and which ones I mute.
I like that analogy. And the more we practice wise attention, the more we become aware of the patterns in our thinking. We start to notice which thoughts are helpful, which ones are harmful, and which ones are simply neutral.
So it's not about suppressing thoughts, it's about discerning which ones to engage with and which ones to let go of. Precisely. And this discerning quality of mind is a key element of the Buddhist path to liberation. The video mentions the powerful story of Angulimala, a serial killer who transformed his life through the Buddha's teachings.
That's right. Angulimala was notorious for his violence, but he underwent a radical transformation by changing his relationship to his thoughts and actions. I'd love to hear more about his story, but we need to be mindful of time.
Of course.
Yeah.
But it's a great example of how even the most deeply ingrained patterns of thinking can be transformed. Angulimala's story shows that it's never too late to change, to choose a different path.
That's a really inspiring message. So we've talked about mindfulness, equanimity, and wise attention as tools for managing our minds. It's starting to feel like I'm getting a whole new set of instructions for how to operate this thing, but how do I actually put all of this into practice in my daily life? It's easy to get caught up in these concepts, but how do I actually live them?
That's the million-dollar question, and the video offers a great example of applying these principles to a common challenge: problem solving. Let's say you're facing a complex problem at work. How might you approach it differently using these Buddhist insights?
Okay, let me think. Instead of immediately jumping into fix-it mode and letting my mind race through all the possible solutions, I could start by taking a few mindful breaths. Just creating some space around the problem, allowing myself to feel whatever emotions are present, whether it's stress, frustration, or even excitement.
That's a great first step. You're already shifting from reacting to responding, which is a key aspect of skillful action in Buddhism. Now, once you've created some space, what's the next step?
Well, instead of trying to force a solution, I could simply observe the problem with a sense of curiosity. What are the facts? What are the assumptions I'm making? What are the different perspectives involved? It's almost like turning the problem into an object of meditation.
That's a fantastic insight. You're bringing wise attention to the situation. You're choosing to engage with the problem in a way that is mindful, discerning, and ultimately more effective.
And by doing that, I'm creating the conditions for more creative and insightful solutions to emerge. It's like I'm planting seeds in the fertile ground of my mind, rather than trying to force them to sprout in concrete.
That's a beautiful analogy, and it highlights the power of aligning our actions with our understanding of the mind. When we approach challenges with mindfulness, equanimity, and wise attention, we tap into a deeper well of wisdom and creativity.
This is all incredibly empowering. It's like I'm being given a whole new set of tools for navigating life's inevitable challenges. But I have to admit, a part of me is still wrestling with this idea of no self. If there's no me in control, does that mean I'm just a leaf blowing in the wind?
That's a natural question, and it brings us back to the heart of the matter. The video points out that the answer to the question, if you're not your thoughts, who's thinking them, lies beyond words. It's a direct experience, a shift in perspective that happens when we truly let go of clinging to a fixed sense of self.
So it's not something I can think my way into. It's more like a felt sense of knowing.
Exactly. It's like the difference between reading about the ocean and actually diving in and experiencing its vastness for yourself.
Okay, I'm starting to get a glimpse of what you mean, but I have to admit it still feels a bit mysterious. And the video mentions that even the Buddha himself remained silent when asked certain metaphysical questions. What's that all about?
The Buddha's silence wasn't a cop-out, it was a skillful teaching. He understood that sometimes the most profound truths can't be conveyed through words. They need to be experienced directly.
So instead of getting stuck in trying to mentally grasp the concept of no self, the invitation is to practice mindfulness, cultivate awareness, and see what we discover for ourselves. It's like being given a treasure map and being told, go explore.
That's a wonderful way to put it. It's an invitation to embark on a journey of self-discovery, to explore the vast and ever-changing landscape of our own minds. And the beauty of it is that the journey itself is the destination.
This is all so inspiring, but I'm also realizing that it can feel a bit overwhelming. Like, where do I even begin to apply all of this in my daily life?
That's a natural feeling. And the good news is, you don't have to do it all at once. Remember the principle of wise attention. Start by choosing one area of your life where you'd like to bring more mindfulness. It could be your work, your relationships, your eating habits, anything.
Okay, that feels manageable.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to overhaul my entire life, I could start with something small, like paying more attention to my breath throughout the day.
That's a great starting point. And from there, you can gradually expand your practice. Notice the sensations in your body, the sounds around you, the taste of your food. These are all opportunities to cultivate mindfulness in everyday moments.
I love that. He's like, I'm being given permission to slow down, to savor the simple things, to wake up to the richness of experience that's already here.
Exactly. And as you practice, you'll naturally start to notice the interconnectedness of everything. Remember, dependent origination. The way our thoughts, words, and actions create ripples that extend far beyond ourselves.
Right, that chain reaction we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So how does that connect to this bigger picture of mindfulness and no self?
Well, when we understand that we are not separate, isolated selves, but rather part of this interconnected web of life, our actions take on a new significance. We start to see how our choices impact not just ourselves, but the world around us.
Whoa, that's deep. So it's not just about personal transformation, it's about contributing to a more mindful, compassionate, and interconnected world.
Exactly. And that's where the true power of these teachings lies. They offer us a path to not just personal liberation, but collective awakening.
This is all incredibly inspiring. I feel like I've been given a whole new lens through which to view the world and myself. I can already sense a shift in my own perspective, a softening around the edges, a greater sense of peace and connection. What about you?
I feel it too, and it's a reminder that these teachings aren't just ancient wisdom, they're living truth that we can access and embody in every moment.
It's amazing to think that these insights have been passed down for centuries, and they're still so relevant today. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of a vast ocean of wisdom.
It is a vast ocean, and that's what makes it so exciting. There's always more to explore, more to discover, more to integrate into our lives.
And speaking of integrating these teachings, I'm curious, what are some key takeaways you hope our listener will carry with them from this deep dive?
I think the most important takeaway is the recognition that thoughts are not facts. They are impermanent, constantly changing, and ultimately empty of a solid thinker.
Right. They're like that river we talked about.
Yeah.
Always flowing, always changing. It's so easy to get caught up in the current of our thoughts, to believe that they define who we are. But this deep dive has really challenged that assumption.
Exactly. And when we see that thoughts are just mental events, we can start to relate to them differently. We can choose to engage with them or let them go rather than being swept away by them.
And that brings us back to the power of mindfulness. It's not just about sitting on a cushion and meditating. It's about bringing that quality of awareness to every aspect of our lives. Noticing our thoughts, our feelings, our bodily sensations, the world around us.
It's about waking up to the present moment instead of sleepwalking through life on autopilot.
I love that analogy. It's like hitting the pause button on the constant stream of thoughts and just being present with what is.
And from that place of presence, we can start to make choices that are aligned with our deepest values. We can cultivate kindness, compassion, and wisdom in our interactions with ourselves and the world.
It's like we're being given a whole new set of instructions for how to live a more meaningful and fulfilling life. And it all starts with that willingness to look inward, to explore the vast and often uncharted territory of our own minds.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. The video mentions the importance of community, of connecting with others who are on a similar path. There are countless resources available, meditation groups, online forums, books, podcasts that can offer support and guidance along the way.
That's such a comforting thought. It's like knowing there are fellow travelers on this journey of self-discovery, and we can learn from and support each other along the way. It makes me think about Angulimala's story again. Here was a man who was consumed by violence and hatred, yet he was able to transform his life through the Buddha's teachings.
It's a powerful reminder that change is always possible. No matter where we've been or what we've done, we all have the potential to awaken to our true nature.
That's a really hopeful message. It's like a light shining in the darkness, reminding us that even in the midst of suffering, there's always the possibility of transformation.
And that transformation begins with taking responsibility for our own minds, cultivating awareness, choosing our thoughts wisely, and acting with compassion and skill.
This has been such an incredible journey. I feel like we've covered so much ground, and yet we've only just begun to explore the depths of this topic. I'm already feeling a shift in my own perspective, a greater sense of spaciousness and peace. I know our listeners are probably feeling the same way.
I hope so. And I hope this deep dive has inspired them to continue exploring these ideas, to keep asking questions, and to keep practicing.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to leave our listener with a final thought-provoking question. Something to ponder as they continue on their own journey of self-discovery. What would you offer?
What if you approached your own thoughts with the same curiosity and openness that you would approach a fascinating new friend? What might you learn about yourself, about the nature of mind, about the very fabric of reality?
Ooh, that's a powerful question. It's an invitation to step into the unknown, to embrace the mystery, and to trust the wisdom that's already within us.
And remember, the answers aren't out there somewhere waiting to be found. They're right here in this very moment, in the space between our thoughts, in the stillness of our own being.
That's such a beautiful reminder. And on that note, we want to thank you, dear listener, for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a privilege to explore these profound questions with you.
May this journey of self-discovery bring you greater peace, wisdom, and freedom.
Until next time, may you be well, may you be happy, and may you be free.